Hey everyone, I got a really exciting video for you today. A good friend of mine that I've known for oof, 5 to 8 years, maybe a decade now. Been a while, and we're actually going to talk about a new topic for this channel, and that's student housing. And with me today is Andrew Scheaffer. How you doing this morning, Andrew?
I'm doing really well, Mike. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Every day's Saturday for me, man.
Yeah,
Life is good.
striving to get there.
There you go. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, why don't you just quickly introduce yourself? Who you are, where you're at, and a little bit about what your business looks like in investing, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways, kind of where we're at currently is we're definitely really wrapped up in more of the student housing market. So we've got a couple rentals already, and what we've tried to do is try to keep them around universities. So I'm out here in Colorado, so we've got our rentals around Colorado State University. And one of the things that we've really liked about the university is there's kind of a bubble around the university, right? So regardless of how the rest of the market's kind of shifting and moving, there's always somebody that's got money to send their kids to school, and
Ah,
ultimately those kids have money to pay rent. So even though rent's been going up near campus, it hasn't necessarily gone up in the surrounding areas. So we've kind of found this little niche within the student housing that we've noticed that kind of trend there.
very nice. So I'm curious. There's so many questions that sort of pop in when you tell that great story. So, did you like? Was your first purchase student housing? Was that an intention or was it an accident?
So kind of a mixture. So my wife had kind of come into a little bit of money at the time, and her and I were actually still in school at CSU, ironically.
Hmm.
And as we were kind of talking about, the rent increase and stuff, we were kind of like, what can we do with some of this money, right?
Yeah.
So what we ultimately decided was, hey, let's buy a house, because if we buy, it was a condo actually at the time, and we're like, hey, if we can buy a condo, one of the nice things about a condo is, one, it's close to campus, so our commute every day to school wasn't going to be too bad. And then on the flip side, we're like, hey, but then we could always rent this later if we wanted, right? Our rent would be lower, close to campus. We could always rent it. All
Yeah.
these things were kind of going off in our head. And we're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, we should do this. So ultimately, that's kind of what led to the decision of, purchasing the condo that we lived in.
Yeah.
So we lived in the condo for a year ourselves, right before we graduated. And then shortly after graduation, we actually moved away. So we moved to Idaho. We were starting our careers, right,
Right.
at the time. So what we decided to do was actually turn that into a rental, and it worked out great, right? We bought it at a low, so, there was a lot of appreciation. Our cash flow was really nice. So we were living happy, right? We were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, we got to get more of these. Like, how do we do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So we actually, after several years of owning that one, we actually basically refinanced it, pulled some of the cash out of that property, and we were able to buy a second property with that. So that's kind of how we shifted from our first property to having two properties.
Yeah.
It's kind of realizing, hey, we can avoid some of the taxes. We don't have to sell it. We can actually shift this money around without anything additional out of pocket, right?
Isn't that awesome? So a couple quick questions. What year was that first condo purchased, if you remember, just roughly?
That condo must have been purchased right around, would have been right around 2012.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good timing. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And and then the ability sort of, you moved away, it still sort of ran itself. And I guess I'm curious, during that time frame, did you rent to one student, two students, brother and sister? What was kind of the mix of the people that moved into your condo?
Yeah. So that actually worked out really well. So one of the big things everybody's always concerned about when it comes to student rentals, right, is, hey, can they actually pay? How do we get co-signers? Who's co-signing? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Luckily for us, we actually had some students that were on the football team on full scholarships. So we actually had a cycle for about 3 years of football players on scholarships that lived there. So they moved in. The cool part was our CSU actually backed them to pay. So CSU was sending them the checks, and then ultimately they were just passing it directly to us. So it was really low risk having these football players in there, which was fantastic.
Yes.
Plus,
Is it two? Is it three? I mean, how many of these big beasts were living in your condos? Like, how many?
Yeah, three. So in
Okay.
Fort Collins, yeah, they've got something called the U+2 law.
Okay.
That was something that we actually had to account for. So as a city, they passed something called U+2, and basically it's yourself and two other people that are non-related.
Ah, okay.
So that's one thing that you've kind of noticed within student housing. You actually have to get like a form signed, for city occupancy.
Okay.
Um, so as people start to look for properties, they've kind of got that in the back of their mind. Our condo is 4 bedrooms, so basically rented out to 3 people. They've got a little bit of extra space, which is kind of nice for them.
Okay. All right. I love that story. So, okay. So the first one works out really well. You actually do exactly what Olivia and I did. The market appreciated and you went back to the bank. You did a cash out refi. And again, just so the audience picks that up, let's just say it was 40 grand. Is that 40 grand taxable? Did you pay taxes on that?
We did not.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
The tenants sort of pay down the debt. You get inflation protection. You get this cash, and then what'd you do? You went out, bought a car, a ski boat. What'd you go buy?
We went and bought the second property with that. So,
oh, look at you! I'm impressed. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So as we kind of realized where the market was going, we started talking about, hey, how do we start to expand, our real estate portfolio? Obviously, we were fresh out of college, making entry level wages at the time. So, not making a lot of money. We're like, how can we kind of start to get this ramped up, get this moving quicker? Obviously, we were living fairly inexpensively, not overspending, anything like that. So we started looking at the market, trying to figure out, hey, where else can we invest? Obviously, we invest in Fort Collins where CSU is. So we started looking at condos. So we kind of like the idea of not having to do anything with lawn maintenance, anything like that, not having to deal with it, right? Students typically like that because, students, some are really great about lawns. Some of them are terrible, right? So,
not my job.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of realized if we had a lawn, that may be an additional expense to us having to hire somebody. So we kind of fell more into looking at condos. We found one condo that, we started running numbers, looked like it would cash flow pretty well. And we got pre-approved, made sure everything worked. And then we just started the process, refinanced one property and pulled that cash out and immediately closed on the second property. So we, when we were at the closing office, basically, we had one document in front. We signed to close, refinance on the first property. They slid over some other documents and we closed on the second property. So it was nice, streamlined, and quick.
Yeah, I love that. And your story is it's so wonderful because you're doing it right. You're a young man, young family. But again, some things you've said, I don't want the audience to miss. First and foremost, I don't know what you said, living cheaply or frugally or whatever word you chose to use. But when you come out of college, right, entry-level jobs, as you gain experience and you do more things, your income goes up. But what you're doing is you're going, no, we've sort of, we're watching that. I call it playing good defense. And frankly, I didn't do that, right? When I was your age and my income doubled and then my income tripled, I went out and did some freaking god-awful stupid things. And I didn't wake up until I was in my early 30s. So I just want to applaud you and call that out so others can see and hopefully emulate what you're doing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And then again, right, you're at the closing table and you're, again, well, I'll just use 40 grand as the number since I used it earlier. You're signing one piece of paper that's going to in theory, hand you a check or a stack of hundreds. And you're like, nope, make that go away and give me this other piece of paper. And like, we never even saw it, never hit our bank account. I think that's wonderful. You're doing it right.
Appreciate it.
All right. So let's wrap up this first half. So where are you now? We've talked about 2. What does your portfolio look like today, Andrew?
Yeah. So currently we're still at 2 properties.
Okay.
We are in the market to look for a third already at this point. So one of the other kind of things that we've started to look at, especially with student housing, is, and you've actually talked about it in some of your other interviews, just how the market's kind of shifting and changing. So we're actually kind of shifting our focus from Fort Collins to a neighboring town called Greeley.
Okay.
We've also got a University of Northern Colorado there. So we're kind of in the market, but there's some interesting things that have kind of caused us to shift to look into a different city. City is only about 30 minutes from where we live, so it's a pretty short drive. But one of the things that we've really realized is, properties to purchase are somewhere between about 30 to 35% less to buy in Greeley comparatively to Fort Collins.
Okay.
And you're only losing about 15 to 20% of the rent.
Simple math. That's a good deal.
Yeah. So as we kind of look at it, we realize, hey, if we shift some of our cash out to another town, we can still get properties, still be near the university, still within that bubble, we can actually increase our, our return on our, cash. So.
I love that story. And I think I know the answer to this, but let's ask it for the audience. You manage these yourselves?
Correct. We do.
And would you manage them in Greeley as well? I guess 30 minutes is close enough. Yeah.
We would. Yeah. As of now, we're keeping everything in house. We've kind of played with the idea of, hey, as we start to increase the portfolio, maybe we start to shift all that off of us. But right now they're fairly easy. It doesn't take a lot to run, just a couple properties. Once you get up to 5, 6, that's when it really starts to become a time suck comparatively to, your day job. Right. So
yeah. I think for you, again, I haven't done student housing, so this is just experience talking. I think what's going to happen eventually is not properties number, but it's number of students. Like if you got to 20 students or 25 students, at some point it's going to be scale, and it's going to get interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I guess I'd be remiss on this first section if I didn't ask about any horror stories. I mean, I can imagine big football players throwing keggers and, taking their football helmets and crashing into your nice walls. Any crazy stories, or they're all just good kids?
Luckily with the football guys, no problems. They were fantastic. No real issues there. We did have one group of students, just a group of guys that had lived there. When they moved out, they left like everything. It was crazy. All these old couches, they didn't do any cleaning. So that was probably the closest we've ever gotten to a real, quote unquote horror story.
Yeah.
It took, like 4 of us, like 3 or 4 days to get property cleaned back up. That way we could turn around and get it re-rented, had to patch some holes, repaint walls, and a lot of it was just basically moving an entire house by ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. We called them, let them know, hey, you guys got to get your stuff. Like, it's cool. Just toss it. We don't need it anyways.
Yeah. We're done. We're graduated. We're going to go buy some real stuff.
Yep. That's exactly what happened. But that's probably the worst thing we've experienced so far.
All right. And then do you have kind of too much of vacancy? Like, you hear about student housing and I immediately think summer vacation, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe you have PhD students or someone working over the summer. I have no idea. How does that work?
Yeah. So luckily, the answer is no. We've never had a vacancy more than like 5 days, right? And that's roughly, we typically set up about 5 days in between tenants. Okay. We'll start marketing, 3 months before the end of the school year and before the end of the lease is up.
Sure.
And our lease, we actually strategically put our lease right in the middle of summer for the students, right? So what we find is half the students typically go home and the other half will actually stay up here.
Oh, okay.
And that's something that we just kind of learned from our own experience. Typically you'll see sometimes like freshmen and sophomores, they're typically the ones that are moving home. Juniors, seniors, those guys are typically the ones that are still staying put. They've got jobs locally. They'll go home and visit for a week or so, but they're always going to stay up here. So, we've never really had a vacancy issue, which is nice. And one of the things with Fort Collins is with CSU over the last couple of years, they've actually expanded by like 20 to 30,000 students.
Wow.
With overall enrollment, right? So as their enrollment blew up, that actually helped the housing market, especially with rentals, right? Really low occupancy or really low vacancy rates. I apologize. Yeah. Even just as Fort Collins as a whole, it's well below the national average when it comes to vacancy rates. So that's been super helpful in keeping them full and never running into that kind of issue.
Yeah. I'm very impressed with what you're doing, and I can't wait to the, not this section, but the next one, to ask you some hard questions about the future. But let's rewind the clock and remind everyone that you don't just suddenly start and figure out student housing. What were you doing? What turned you on to real estate investing? Sort of tell us your origin story.
Yeah, so I was kind of the way I got started in real estate was I was still in college, still kind of trying to figure out, hey, what do I want to do with my life? You know, kind of the average student questions, right?
Yeah.
And as I talked to my dad a lot, you know, one of the books that actually really reframed the way I think, which kind of makes me laugh, is the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, right?
Yep.
So my dad had actually given that to me when I was, I think I was like a sophomore in college. He's like, hey, you should read this and, you know, see what you take out of it. We'll get together. We can talk about what you learned. So I read it, you know, first time it was like, all right, you know, some of these ideas kind of make some sense. And then, you know, ultimately I read it, you know, a few other times and all of a sudden it started to really click. I'm like, wow, like I can really start to make money by just owning property. Like this is amazing. Like, how do I do this? Right? This sounds really cool. And I would say that's kind of what really sparked it. From there, ironically, I had actually met you shortly after.
Yeah.
Which was great, you know, kind of talking to you a little bit about what you did for a career and kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do once I got out of school and kind of made that path. And as I kind of learned more about, hey, you know, Mike's got a bunch of properties. This is kind of what he's doing, you know, between those two things, it just really kind of intrigued me, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly kind of what I want to eventually do. So I went back and just started reading everything I could possibly read on the internet. You know, I bought dozens of books, real estate, and, you know, everything I was reading was just real estate, how to auto, you know, basically do landlording on autopilot, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately, the more I gained and learned, the more I got excited, right? And now I'm hooked. So
Yes.
it's definitely something I find myself frequently on my free time, you know, either cruising, you know, the MLS, you know, looking on Zillow, doing comps just for fun to kind of see, hey, where property's at. So
yeah, you got to stay. You got to stay in the game, right? You never know when the market gets soft, and if you're active, you can see it coming, right? Which is what you're saying now. So I'd be remiss if I didn't at least broach the subject. You're a married young man. Was your wife always on board, or did you have to talk to her, or was she into the Rich Dad series as well? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, so her and I kind of talked a little bit about it after I had read the books and stuff. She's read them before as well.
Okay.
Not as big into them as I was, where I was grabbing everything I could possibly grab on them. But she was very much on board, and I think that's really what helped me.
Oh, no question. Yeah, no question.
Helped us, right? Is as we kind of talked about it, we kind of started saying, hey, where do we want our future to be? You know, how do we want to set ourselves up? You know, once we get to, you know, quote unquote retirement.
Yeah.
And getting to financial freedom, right? So as we talked more about it, you know, her and I really got excited about it. And ironically, she's actually the one that found that first property, right? She was the one online looking, found this first property, and she's like, hey, look what I found. This looks amazing. And then, of course, we started talking about it. We started running the comps together. We're like, yeah, this is great. Like, let's do it, you know? So yeah, she's been very, very involved, which has been great. And she's actually one of the people that, kind of by herself, she does a lot of the showings and stuff when it comes to actually doing the properties and being the landlord. She goes out, meets you know, the tenants, shows them the property, kind of does the contract, make sure everything looks good, and ultimately make sure that they're the ones paying her, right? So she's very involved in the managing process on that side.
Yeah. Again, what you're sort of laying down here is stuff that people need to realize. So first and foremost, you had conversations up front. You were talking a consistent language. You were both willing to sort of put the target of financial freedom or retirement, whatever word you choose to use, out there. But once you do that together, then you by default, I don't know if you call it sacrifice or choose to live below your means or whatever that vocabulary is for you. I call it good defense, which allows you to take significant strides. And then you involve her in the business, right? You both are involved in the business. I can't tell you how important that is for couples that are going down this path to both be involved in the business. You can't have one person off all by themselves, spending hours during the week doing whatever they're doing and not leveraging the other partner, right? One of the reasons you're going to be wildly successful is you are both involved. So nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, let's fast forward. You have two in the market for a third. Where do you see this thing in 3 to 5 years? And let's not forget, you know, your career is going to take off. Your income is probably going to go up 50 or 60% between now and then. So tell us what Andrew and your wife and your portfolio looks like in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, so 3 and 5 years. One of the things that we're kind of doing as well, which is very defensive as we continue to grow, is exactly like you mentioned, right? As my careers continue to kind of take off, my salaries continue to increase pretty drastically. We're actually saving a portion of my salary.
Yep.
So let me kind of take a small step back. So we live on my salary. My commissions that I earn through my job, we actually save.
Nice.
And on top of that, we're saving my wife's entire paycheck as well. So we're doing a lot of saving, between the two of us, and also, any sort of cash flow we're gaining from our properties, we're saving as well. So we're continuing to store those away in, an account. And that's allowed us to get to wanting to buy additional properties much, much faster, right? So within 3 to 5 years, we assume that trend will continue, right? We'll be able to save larger and larger sums just from our own salaries. And then as we continue to acquire properties, that'll continue to kind of funnel in there as well. Ideally, we'd like to, probably add another, 5 properties at least. Ideally, I think we want to try to get into trying to purchase at least one per year.
Yeah, I think that's
really start to kind of grow that portfolio up over time.
Yeah, I think again, right. This is what I sort of see for you if you choose to do it. And what you're doing is excellent. If you can live on off your base, awesome. If you can live off your base and save your commissions, even better. And if you can live on your base, save your commissions, and save your wife's money, this flywheel that you're on is going to start to just explode. So congratulations. I think more Americans and more people should do that. It just doesn't happen. It's not natural. What I think what's going to happen is you'll probably be on a path to do 1 or 2 houses a year. Or actually, let's say 1 house a year for the next 2 or 3 years. And then what you're going to see, my prediction is year 3, 4, and 5, you're going to have the opportunity to do 2. 1 with your savings, but don't forget, you can also go back and refi maybe that second condo you bought. And then maybe you refi that second one in wherever it was, Boulder or wherever, and then go to Greeley and buy one, right? So you can start to use the cycle to help you. So if you choose to do that, you could probably in a very short time start adding 2 a year, which would be, that's when this really gets fun and interesting.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. We love the idea of that. And yeah, you're spot on. That's exactly what we want to eventually get to. Okay.
I guess in the future, do you ever see a time where right now you mentioned just a minute ago, you're saving your wife's income. Do you ever imagine that maybe she'll stop working when the family grows to a certain level or not? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we've obviously had those conversations. We actually have a daughter that's 10 months old at this point. So
congratulations.
Pretty young. Thank you. Appreciate it. So that's definitely kind of been a very different lifestyle, right? Now we're definitely going to bed at 8:39.
Yeah, I know.
Early with the baby now. So yeah, as things continue to grow, her and I kind of discussed it. Eventually, we want to make sure that we get to that kind of financial stability point before we actually, really decide whether she's going to stop working or eventually both of us stop working, right? Yep. So we do want to make sure that we set ourselves up ahead of time. Yeah. So we do understand we're both kind of in it for the long run to ensure that that's set up correctly before we do that.
And I guess the last question in this section is, do you have a number? You don't have to share the number, but a yes or no is fine, that says, hey, I'm just going to make up numbers, $5,000 a month in positive cash flow or 7,500. Do you have a number that's kind of that, that target number?
Kind of.
You need to work on that.
Yeah. So
that's not good.
So her and I have kind of looked at it, and ideally we'd want our cash flow to match both of our salaries. And the reason I kind of say kind of is as that continues to increase, the idea of, hey, we can keep growing that and it'll, keep getting bigger and bigger. That kind of makes us,
Yeah,
we kind of like.
Don't be like me. You're starting so well, playing good defense. Your job is your offense. Your offense is going to explode, and that gap. And you've already mentioned you're saving most of it, but you're going to have one of those years that we all know in sales happens. It's going to be a record W-2 and all of that. Don't live that way, right? Don't let your great offense to sort of tell you, I don't need to play defense anymore. Don't let that happen to you. Not that it will, but I'm saying this more for other people, not for you. Don't just have that great offensive year, say defense doesn't matter. I'll just out earn my way to retirement. It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, and as it continues to grow, ideally we want our passive cash flow to
Yeah,
continue to grow with it, kind of like,
sure.
like
Yeah.
that. So as of now, we've got a lot of time left in our careers, and
Oh, just a
ultimately
couple of years.
things. Yeah, just a few, right?
Yeah,
So
just a few. Oh, my youngster.
yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
eventually I'm sure we'll come to a solid number where it makes sense, and we'll be happy with it. But as of now, we just want to try to grow it as large as we can.
Yeah, yeah. It's maybe something you could think about over the holidays or whatnot is, what's kind of a minimum monthly nut or monthly spend? Because what you need to do on that graph, right? We were just drawing with our hands, right? Defense, offense, is you need to put a line somewhere. And it could be more than you're spending now, right? Let's just again make up numbers. Let's say your monthly nut now, because you have a 10-month-old and you're living frugally, is 3,500. What you can do over the winter break is go, you know what? When we're in our 30s and ultimately in our 40s, we're going to want our monthly nut to be double that, right? Just life happens, kids go to school, right? You have another child, college is expensive, blah blah blah. You just got to have some kind of target. I don't like hearing just keep adding. I'd love to, even if the number can change, but I think you have to put a flag on top of the mountain and look at it together. At least that's my recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
Cool. All right. So what I always do is with my interviews is I turn it over to you, and for once I'm quiet and just let you share whatever you'd like. How to get a hold of you, questions or books you like, quotes, whatever you'd like. Shout out to your dad, whatever you want to do. This is for you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think one of the things that some of the advice I'd give anybody that's kind of getting started, especially being a bit younger, is just kind of read as much as you can, right? The internet's your friend. Nowadays, you can Google, you can find anything and everything you possibly want. Definitely read books. That has been one of the things that has really kind of helped me the most. And one of the things that I've really kind of realized over time is, if you kind of think of it in, two elevators, right? You've kind of got your overall experience, and then kind of your overall skills, right? So if you can get your knowledge of just understanding and the real estate game up as quick as possible, right? And you've kind of got this elevator up here, which is kind of time and just overall experience. As these kind of start to meet, once they meet, that's kind of the peak, right? That's where you've got the most time left. You've got the best experience possible. And that's what you need to kind of capitalize on. So for me, it's been all about, I've got all this time right now, right? It's all about trying to get my understanding of real estate up as quick as possible. So spend a lot of time researching, find different websites that are helpful, right? I use multiple things like Zillow, and for Collins, there's something called coloproperties.com. And that's been super helpful. It pulls directly from the MLS, and it allows me you have all these different sources to kind of pull these properties in and run my comps against them and kind of really see what's actually going on. So just finding different things like that and just really exploring is probably the best advice I could give anybody.
That's awesome. And again, I want to thank you for getting up early on a Saturday and recording this video. I knew I wanted to get you on the channel. Student housing is important. I hear questions all the time. So I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Of course, Mike. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.